You know, Jillian, it's interesting. The global markets are rebounding this morning after a 3-day sell-off based on those tariffs. And right now, it looks like the Dow Jones futures are up 2%. The S&P futures up about 1.5%. European markets are up about 1.5%. Asian markets strong with Nikkei up 6 percentage points. There has been a question inside the White House and also in Capitol Hill on if the markets found their bottom, would that provide Donald Trump enough space to negotiate the way he wants to negotiate, especially with China? I'm curious, what's your reaction to the rebound today? We don't know if this is, as Frank Collins said, a dead cat bounce, or whether this is going to be if the markets have actually found their bottom. I'm curious what your thoughts are and if you have any theories on why the markets are rebounding today.
Well, a lot is resting on that so-called dead cat and whether or not it actually is going to bounce or not. I think the rebound is very much due to investors betting that Trump is going to revert to form and start negotiating, even though his advisors are saying that the negotiation word, what they call the N-word in black humor right now, is basically not on the table. They're just going to listen to other countries coming to them right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether this investor bet on the negotiations is going to actually keep high or not play out. The key thing to watch right now, though, is U.S.-China relations, because China said it's going to, quote, fight to the death. And that suggests that they are not backing down. Trump has obviously put in place a threat to raise tariffs another 50%, takes it over 100%. That's very disruptive. One of the most interesting things that happened overnight, which everyone needs to watch, is that China quite deliberately let its currency weaken below a key level against the dollar. And that's one signal that they may be getting ready to use devaluation currency wars as a next step in these trade wars. If that happens, expect a very strong reaction from Washington. And then the really big question of all is, will China start flexing by potentially not buying treasuries at auctions or even trying to sell a few treasuries? Because, again, if it does that, it could drive up interest rates in a way that certainly Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, does not want to see right now.
Wow. OK, so the president says he's not backing off on his trade wars and is even threatening to increase the taxes on China, giving the country an ultimatum yesterday.
With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. I have a great relationship with President Xi. I hope it's going to stay that way. I have great respect for China, but they can't do this. We're going to have one shot at this, and no other president's going to do this, what I'm doing. And I'll tell you what, it's an honor to do it, because we have been just destroyed, what they've done to our system. And nobody but me would do this. Nobody but me would do this. You know, it would be nice to serve, a nice, easy term. But we have an opportunity to change the fabric of our country. We have an opportunity to reset the table. It's the only chance our country will have to reset the table, because no other president would be willing to do what I'm doing or to even go through it. Now, I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end.
We talked about some of the criticism of these tariffs. Even the New York Post, broadly supportive of President Trump, is out with a new piece this morning titled "Start Talking Trade Deals, Mr. President, and End the Tariff Meltdown." The Post writes this: the global economy can't be changed in a day. The offshoring of American manufacturing happened over decades, and even if tariffs have their desired effect, it will take years for domestic production to return. And that's a big if. Mr. President, you have the world in a panic. Rather than take a blunderbuss to the world's economy, pick your targets carefully. China and Vietnam may be fair game, but why hurt allies as much as economic foes or rivals? Why not negotiate a free trade zone with the EU, as Elon Musk suggested over the weekend? Why instead drive our allies away from U.S. markets and into the arms of those very same competitors who pose America the greatest threat. The most immediate benefit will be what Wall Street craves most: specificity and clarity. Show that there's an upside that does not require 2 generations and a tractor trailer of wishful thinking. It is a small group now left that shares the president's view that with a few tariffs, he can quickly remake the global economic order. Peter Navarro is making that comment, that analysis. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, as well. But even many of Donald Trump's closest supporters, the people who funded his campaign on Wall Street, are saying, what are we doing here?
Yeah, we'll add Steve Bannon to the list of those who think that this is the right approach, that this is the moment to really play tough, particularly with China, but to deliver these tariffs and to sort of force these companies to invest in the United States. But we have heard from weeks now from economists saying that this doesn't really work anymore. It's out of step with today's economy, and it would take too long to do, meaning prolonging this pain. And Mike, my question to you, first and foremost, is what is a blunderbuss? My second question is, how long is Donald Trump and Republicans that you've been talking to feel like they're willing to put up with this political pain? We've started to see a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit from the GOP suggesting this is not the right approach. Ted Cruz saying, look, this could lead to a 2026 bloodbath. And he said, though he was supportive of the idea of tariffs, hey, this needs to end quickly. We're also hearing from the Treasury Secretary behind closed doors making that same argument, that no one's telling President Trump, hey, you're wrong. They're at least saying, hey, make this fight end soon.
Well, first of all, a blunderbuss is the opposite of a Greyhound bus.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that very few people take.
It's a weapon.
Yeah, it is a weapon. This entire story, and we've been talking about it yesterday and earlier this morning, is a tragedy playing out in front of our own eyes. A tragedy every single hour of every single day. Manifestly obvious yesterday afternoon during the president's press availability, when he was talking about the economy. And he talks about the economy, and it's his economy, it's his presidency. There is, for all practical purposes, no Council of Economic Advisors, no Secretary of the Treasury, no one on Wall Street who is close enough to him to say, you're wrong, stop this, give it a pause, give it a 90-day pause. And lastly, and most tragically, if you speak to people who know him or think they know him, Wall Street people who think they know him, know what he might do, know what he might say, know that he is a man alone, that he has set the United States, Gillian, is now a nation alone economically, led by a man who was told, I was told yesterday, who is someone who has known him for years, is uniquely without humility.
Well, I would argue that it's very interesting you mentioned the Council of Economic Advisors, because Stephen Moran, the chair of that, gave a really interesting speech yesterday at the White House that people should definitely look at, where he repeatedly said that, one, Trump alone was going to decide what was going to happen next. Secondly, what the Council of Economic Advisors was setting out was a menu of potential recipes that Trump, as a head chef, could potentially cook. And thirdly, the magic word that they keep stressing is burden sharing. They feel that they want other countries around the world to share the burden of America, not just providing a huge consumer market, but also providing the reserve currency for the world, which they regard as both a blessing and a curse. And the real problem with that is that they're obsessed with China, and they're essentially asking Southeast Asian countries right now to choose whether to go with China or America.
Vietnam.
And Vietnam. And I was in Southeast Asia recently and talking to leaders over there, and they don't want to choose, and they don't think they can choose, because their economies are so entwined with China. They're sitting next to China. The idea of turning their back on China is almost impossible.
Gene Robinson, a couple things. First of all, we have seen a split in sort of MAGA world. We saw it early on immigration between Steve Bannon and Elon Musk. And that got heated. We're now seeing it, I think, in an even more dramatic and possibly conclusive way, again, between the Steve Bannon side, Peter Navarro's side of the world. By the way, Howard Lutnick wants to be Treasury Secretary based on everything I hear. So, the true believers, if you want to know who the true believers are, they are Steve Bannon and they are Peter Navarro and they're Donald Trump, right? So, but this split is even dramatic. That's the first thing. Second thing, and I'm wondering if you had the same reaction I did. We're so used to getting this sort of fire hose of falsehoods coming out of the White House and the Trump campaign and everything, that when you see something where you go, yeah, he really means what he's saying right now, it stands out. And when that clip we showed of Donald Trump, where he said, listen, I'm the only guy who would do this. Nobody else believes this but me, basically. And he said, if I don't do it now, it's never going to get done. That comes from a man who has had this as his driving ideological belief since 1987. The United States is being taken advantage of. Our government officials are suckers, and he's the guy who can fix it. I'm wondering whether you had the same reaction to me. Say what you will about tariffs and everything, but he believed every word he said right there because he's been saying it since 1987.
I had exactly the same reaction. I was saying, fact check, true for a change.
True.
He is the only president who would do this because it is so stupid and crazy and goes so against it, not just every economic theory, but it goes against reality as everybody else knows it. He seems to have a fixed and erroneous view of how balance of trade actually works. When you hear Lutnick and others talking about making are we going to have $2 an hour workers in the United States making tennis shoes? Are we going to have $5 an hour workers in the United States screwing tiny screws into iPhones? No, we are not. We are not going to have that. Either it's going to continue to be done in places where labor is cheaper, or that iPhone is going to cost, $3,000 or whatever because of the labor costs, and that's just the reality. Donald Trump doesn't understand comparative advantage. He doesn't understand. He's making absolutely no provision or not taking into account our surplus with many countries and services, for example, and I think he vastly underestimates the power of President Xi and the power of China to retaliate and cause real problems for the United States. This is the second biggest economy in the world. The Chinese say they're not going to back down, and they can make things worse, much worse for us, and so they'll suffer, but we will suffer too. The whole thing is madness. It's just a giant own goal, but he's not going to back down. He's serious about this.